All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Kristen Curick. I'm the host of the Philadelphia Glass chapter and also the King of Prussia, Pennsylvania Glass chapter. So we are here with our May author, Julie Chavez. Hello. It's so wonderful to meet you, and I so appreciate you taking the time to speak with the Glass today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, did you maybe want to give a bit of an introduction of yourself, Julie, and then we can get into some questions?
Sure, sounds great. I'm Julie Chavez, author of Everyone But Myself, former librarian, which many people will be surprised to hear, current banker. I'm actually working in banking, which is kind of hilarious to everyone, including me. And mother to two kids, Nolan and Eli. Nolan is now 19 and Eli is 17. So it's kind of crazy for those who are reading the book in real time, obviously. Live in California, and that's really it. I'm working on slowly writing a second book, but I will say that getting two kids off to college has required more time than I would have anticipated. So that's where you find me today.
You are certainly busy.
Yes, it's so funny. We're all busy. We have full lives and there are seasons, but yeah, there is a lot happening that is taking up my time.
Awesome. So the title "Everyone But Myself" really captures something so many of us feel but rarely say out loud. When did you realize that that was the right title, and what did it feel like to name it so directly?
It's so funny you ask about the title because that originally wasn't the title. So the original title that I came to the table with was Little by Little. So there's a Stephen King quote from his book on writing, which is not in my book because, fun fact, it was going to be $2,000 to use it. I think it was something like that. But all of these things that I didn't know because I was so green when I went into publishing. But the original title was Little by Little because Stephen King wrote about his sobriety and he talked about he said, at first I had to trust the people who told me it would get better if I gave it time to do so. And he said, little by little, I found the beat again, and then I found the joy again. And so little by little became this sort of mantra for me. And so much of this, it was so tied to the story. But in the end, when we talked about titles, there was a way to figure it out. But the log line that I came on with the book, the way I described it to everyone was the story of what happened after I spent too long taking care of everyone but myself. And we workshopped, I mean, hundreds of titles, some of which were totally ridiculous. And finally, we landed on Everyone But Myself. And so it is the perfect title for the book because I think any caregiver, and especially women, can really relate to that piece because there are times when you are caring for someone else or in a family. I think, some of it is our societal training, obviously, but then some of it is just inherent, I think, to some of us who really derive deep joy and meaning from caregiving. So it is natural to put others ahead. And then children, especially when they're small, demand that. I mean, you can't tell the crying baby, like, oh, I'll just be back in 30 minutes after I get in a quick workout. So things like that really have resonated. So that ended up being the title, and I was so glad that it was.
Fantastic. Um, you write about losing your own voice while being a devoted mother, wife, and daughter. What was the moment that you recognized yourself as someone who needed care and not just someone who would give care?
I truly think that night, it's so interesting for me to think back because I was sitting on the couch, 20 feet from where I am now, and there was just a total sense of dread really, but also just feeling like I need some adults in the room here. I can't things aren't working for me. I'm not able to puzzle myself out of this. So I think that was sort of the critical moment where I thought, okay, I'm slipping too far too fast and, all of my tricks aren't working. But I think then over time, we're always people who need care. I think we just are so adaptable and we can push that to the side for a long time. And so I think that was a moment of understanding for me. And then growing into that, I mean, talking about adaptation, that was still something, there's that moment where I thought, I need care. But developing that into a habit and developing into a mental habit where I not only give myself care, but demand that care from others, that has taken years. And it is becoming more natural now, but I think at the beginning it was uncomfortable, not because I was some kind of martyr, but because I just really felt like I should be able to handle this.
Wow, that's really powerful. Thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Wow. So anxiety is often described as weakness, but reading your story, it feels more like a signal. How do you think about anxiety now from the other side?
I love how you said that. It's more like a signal, and it's true. So for me, the way I think of it now is my anxiety really lays on top of my feelings. So the more that they kind of start to rise and push up, then this becomes almost like the alarm bell that's saying there's something you have to deal with here. And sometimes it's not, I know for some people it can be deeper trauma or things that have happened and those kind of rise up. But for me, it really is that I had this conversation with a friend recently and she said she's a bottler. So she takes all her feelings and like shoves them way down deep and doesn't want to talk about them. And I was explaining something to her about watching Nolan and Eli, especially in this season, and it is ending after ending and beginning after beginning too, but it's both. And she said to me, it seems like you feel things in real time. And I said, yeah. And she said, that sounds exhausting. And I was like, it was the first time I actually thought, yeah, it really is. It's kind of a tough way to live because I really do feel things very deeply as they're happening, which is a gift because I don't have a lot of regret looking back, thinking I missed something, but it can be intense. And so I think for me, that's where the anxiety comes in, where I am too busy to feel those feelings, or I feel them, but I'm not fully like, I don't want to burst out in tears at the swim meet. Keep it together, Julie. So some of those then sort of sit with me for longer than they need to in some ways because bottled feelings concentrate, I have found. And so then they become more intense and difficult to manage as opposed to sort of letting them feel or be felt as they come. So, in that way, saying anxiety is a signal is an amazing way to put it. And additionally, I think that I do think of anxiety as kind of a natural byproduct of being alive right now. There's just so much information, so much happening, so many ways that we're exposed to things that are hard and heavy and also wonderful and beautiful. So all of that coming in is just something we have to deal with it. So I think that's how I think of it now is when I start to feel anxious, I think I always turn back to basics, but I definitely no longer think of it as something that would make me a worry wart or kind of the ways I had it categorized before.
Wow, thank you. Speaking about vulnerability, there is so much vulnerability inherent in writing about therapy and medication. Did you ever hesitate to go there?
Not really, mostly because I really am, I mean, to put too fine a point on it, an open book, LOL. But I think the, I really, when I set out to write this book, it truly was as straightforward as I describe it in those last chapters, which is I wanted someone else to be able to benefit from that time and that suffering that I went through. And had I known some of those things, there's some that could have been avoided, some maybe not. I mean, that's a different conversation for future past and multiverses. But I think in general, I really did want people to know that I am on paper not a person who not presents as sometimes people having that idea of what an anxious person looks like or what someone, I think we all have certain archetypes in our minds that we sort of hold on to. So because I'm not that person and because it still happened to me and I'm a privileged woman with resources, I live in a safe place, I have a husband and a family who support me, and even still anxiety does not care who you are. So I think being able to write about that was a privilege. And then also the parts about therapy and medication. I mean, if I'm not going to tell the whole truth about it, then there's no point because I want people to know that there is not only no shame in that, but that this is the benefit of living in the modern world. Also, right? We're assaulted by all these things, but then we also can see over the fence into someone's house and say, oh, that person goes to therapy and it's fruitful. So hopefully that was meaningful to include, but luckily for me, I really, I mean, I had been far enough past the wondering what people think. And I think that's also a huge benefit of getting older that I'm really enjoying.
Wonderful. Your honesty, I think, is really empowering. So thank you for including those aspects. Um, you mentioned before that you were well, you mentioned before on here on Zoom and also in the book that you were an elementary school librarian, and you're now a memoirist. And I'm not sure. You said that you're writing another book. So books clearly live at the center of your life. Were there books that helped carry you through the year that was the subject of the book that we're speaking about today?
So I got, as part of the publication for this book, one of my favorite things was I hosted a podcast called Ask a Librarian and got to do it for about a year. And it was such a gift. It was really fun. And if I haven't annoyed you too much at the end of this interview, you can go listen to it. But that's neither here nor there. The point being that one of the interviews I did was with Gregory Maguire, who's the author of Wicked. And I told him I really thought that book was going to work out for him, and he was happy to hear that. But I think the thing that he said was that we read to store up comfort. And he had just written a book called Cress Watercress, and he said he had written it for a teenager in his life, and he thought, what would I have told her when she was younger to prepare her for this time that she's going through? And so this idea that we read not only now for comfort, but there are so many words that are so precious to me, even those words by Stephen King. I mean, I clung to those sorts of pieces. So a lot of those words that I had read or people that I had known, books are very real to me, which is why certain books will mess me up for days. I have to be mindful of what I read. But I think just those truths that we find in fiction and that we find in the books we read, I find those just to be so close to my heart. So I think what I leaned on, I mean, I wasn't doing a ton of reading at the time, and that was sort of another piece of this meltdown is that I had just stopped doing anything that would alleviate those feelings from rising and concentrating. And reading was part of that. So On Writing was one of the early ones I read as I was kind of coming back into myself. I read a couple of fiction books. I think I read Eleanor and Park around that time, if you haven't read that one by Rainbow Rowell.
Oh,
And I
beautiful.
love that book. So I'm not a huge romance person, but I love stories of people finding themselves, finding each other again. And so those were books. Also, there's a book that's called, let me think about it. It's Marjorie Holmes. It's my mom had given to me. It's called I've Got to Talk to Somebody, God. And it's a very sweet book, and I think also Gift from the Sea. So those were, and I know I mentioned that one in the book by Anne Morrow Lindbergh. Gift from the Sea is one that I revisit often because I think there's something so comforting about reading about other women in other seasons of the world or times of the world that had these same essential struggles. I think it makes me feel less alone because I think there's heavy fear that what we're feeling isn't normal, or what I'm feeling is outsized or inappropriate to what's happening. And that was such a huge thing for me in therapy, was even just having somebody say that's valid. What you're feeling is valid. And so when I read something like Gift from the Sea, I think, oh, this is valid. And I feel overwhelmed because it is overwhelming to love someone and share your life with them.
Um, so I'm always struck by what resonates with people versus what the author expects will land when authoring a book. Since the book came out, what have readers said that surprised you the most?
That is an excellent question. Well, I will say the funniest thing that has surprised me is people saying that it's boring. Like there were just no stakes to it kind of thing. And that's mostly on Goodreads, where I stay away from for all sorts of mental health reasons. But, that's the piece of, you have to disconnect, I think, with readers. Like you finish the book, you send it out into the world. And I very much felt this way, where it was like, that is done. However people want to feel about it is a-okay with me. But I think probably the most surprising thing has been people's response to how I described our arguments. I think people really felt like they had had that experience with their spouse, especially. So I think watching or hearing some of that, people saying, you arguing with your husband. And I just think, yeah, that's definitely one we can all relate to, whether you're partnered or not. I mean, it's just someone who loves you and sees you, but also will make you totally insane. So I think people's uh, relating to mine and Mondo's relationship was a little more surprising, because in my mind, it's a book about, I think I was thinking more of the parenting. So I'm surprised to see people who related to those other pieces. But I think anyone who can give a good forensic accounting of an argument with their spouse is someone who I would like to talk to. Break it down. Who won? I think I lost your video, Kristen. Are you still there? I think there was a comment or a chat. I'll answer this one. What advice would you give another person going through a similar situation? That is a great one. Oh, you're back. Almost. Okay, well, I'll answer the what advice would I give? The advice that I would give to someone is to talk about it, whether it's with someone that's safe with you or a therapist. But also, I think the best thing I could tell anyone is, you won't be stuck here forever. If you are there now, it's okay, and we can do things to move you forward, but you won't be here forever. So I think it starts with that reassurance for me, and then also asking and starting with that self-awareness of, okay, where can I lighten my load? Who can I talk to? What can I do? And it might be surprising to you. It's so something I don't think that's in the book. No, I had written something about it. It's amazing with books how much you write and then they're like, nope, that's not, and especially with mine because it was a little specific. So one of the people that has ended up being such a support to me is my wax girl. I don't know. She's an esthetician, obviously. I was going to say, what's her official term? But legitimately, I went to her that first weekend after I had started the Zoloft, and that was really where I had bottomed out. And I said to her, is it okay if I don't talk too much because I'm just in a really tough place? And she said, of course, you don't have to talk, but I'm a really good listener. And we ended up really developing a friendship, and she shared her mental health experience with me. And I was just telling her recently, I mean, I still go to her, and I said, you've become such a place of comfort to me while you rip the hairs out of my body. But she is just such a, a person that was a surprise support during that time. So I think those are the pieces, just to pay attention to yourself, I mean, Mr. Rogers, look for the helpers, and then also, and the people that can help you. And then remember, you won't be there forever. Stuckness is one of my great trigger fears. This is the nice thing about writing a book like this. You can basically have a therapy session anytime you talk to people about it in an interview. It's fantastic. Kristen, I think you're back. Oh, I'm glad. I don't think I have your sound yet. Let's see. Halfway through, Sheila. Well, hurry up. I'm kidding. Most helpful part of therapy to my growth. I think the most helpful part of therapy is being honest with myself. And that was the great thing about my therapy experience was being able to sit down and speak without a filter. Because I think, again, we have, even with Mondo, like I have a wonderful relationship. We just celebrated 24 years of marriage. Fun fact, we were on an anniversary trip and we just landed, and someone on the plane when we were deplaning asked if we were siblings. And it was pretty much the worst thing that's ever happened to us. I was like, oh my gosh. And then she doubled down and she was like, well, you're chewing your gum the same way. And I was like, please stop, for the love of God. So that's just a side note. But I think seeing the in therapy, I could sit down, like there are things I can say there that allow me to release them. Because here's the honest truth. Sometimes I am petty. Sometimes I am difficult. Sometimes I'm being a real brat about something that I shouldn't be a brat about. But I still need to deal with that. And I need to let that out. And the even to be able to say it and then say, I don't like feeling that way, or I don't want to feel this way. There's just a gateway there. So I think having that honesty with myself and with, yeah, I think it's just honesty with myself, because we're witnesses to our own experience, but sometimes we're not that reliable. So I think the other piece of that being someone to say, when I do say something, so honesty with myself, but then also Kim helping me be honest or see something more truly than it is. Because sometimes I think our inner voice is telling us a story that's not quite true. And then being able to evaluate that honestly is also helpful. Am I still in therapy? Yes. And I still take my Zoloft every day. I see Kim kind of on an as needed basis normally. Now I text her and say, hey, I feel like I want to murder everyone. Can I come see you? And then she squeezes me in there. So it's a good experience. I don't have as much where I need to go on a schedule, but I do notice that for me, and you see this in the book, change isn't really that easy for me. So that is something where now I can identify, oh, I need a little more support with this. And that is a huge gift to give myself.
Thank you
The
so
early,
much. And I
you're
apologize
back.
for my issues.
Oh,
Yes.
I love
My goodness,
issues.
my computer just shut down. Um, so this book is going to hit home with a lot of our readers who are in the season of putting everyone else first. What would you want them to take away, not from the book necessarily, but from your experience?
I think what I would want them to take away is that your family, the people who love you benefit best. If you are someone who cares for others, the best thing you can do for them is care for yourself. And putting yourself on the list is not only essential, but it really opens up permission for other people to do the same. And it doesn't have to be, luckily, I think we're coming out of sort of this self care as like a bubble bath idea. That doesn't seem to be so prevalent anymore, for which I'm very grateful. But I think putting yourself on the list, paying attention to your needs, those are habits that you can cultivate, and they're habits that you can not only establish for yourself, but model for the people you love. So I think there's just a lot of freedom that comes in paying attention to who you are, who you're becoming, and who you want to be.
While we're on the topic of self-care,
Mhm.
did you feel that your family, your partner, your children's lives, their quality of life improved with your journey into self-care and coming to understand yourself better?
Yes and no. I mean, I'll say yes. I'm sure they would disagree because now they have to do a lot more bathroom cleaning and stuff. So, I mean, their quality of life, like, that's questionable. But no, it absolutely has. And I think their awareness of others has been amplified by that because, luckily my kids now are at an age where they're seeing other people and they can see me more as a person. Whereas I think when they're younger, it's just mom. So as that happens, then yes, for sure, their quality of life improves because it just gives everybody else permission to do the same thing. And I think being honest and, having some conversations with them where I'm able to say, when you do this, it impacts me. Because I think there's a lot of that too, excuse me, with kids where I was always very cautious. I don't ever want them to feel like they made me feel a certain way or I don't want to take my emotional stuff and say, here, you hold this. However, their actions do impact me. So it's that line of like, how can I be honest with you about this is something you did that I had this response, and now how do we navigate this? So I think in general, I think it changed our lives for the better. Quality of life, I think, like I said, they have to do a lot more, which is good for them because otherwise
It
they'll be
is good for them.
horrible roommates one day and no one will like them or want to live with them.
You've done them a favor.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to write that down.
Yes. So if you could go back and say one thing to yourself at the beginning of the journey that you write about in the book, what would you say?
It is the same thing I think Asha brought up, like that
Oh, yeah.
I would say no, I mean, but I love emphasizing that again because I was so scared that I wouldn't be able to get out of it. And so I think it would be two things. I would say you will not be here forever, which is I was so fortunate to have my sister to be able to say those things for me. And I really do hold that so that was just such a privilege to have that person in my life who would say, you're not going to be here forever. But also, I think I would tell the self before that, to just do things for myself. I think I didn't do a great job of that. And to also tied in with that, you don't earn rest. That is a lie I think that we all labor under. And prioritizing that would have been helpful. Hindsight is really 2020.
Certainly, that's so impactful, and it's so good to hear someone else say what's or write what was in my head.
I like
Uh,
that.
you were deep in that role of mom, wife, librarian, daughter, um, neighbor, uh, woman. When this happened, um, do you think it would take a crisis to shake us loose from these identities, or is there another way to navigate uh, finding yourself within the identities that you were deep in?
That is a really good question. I think for some people, it is possible to avoid the crisis point. I think for me, it probably had to go that way. I think there's a piece that I needed to release control, and there is no way you were going to pry that from my just death gripped hands. So I think that I had to reach a point of full, I cannot do this anymore on my own in order to rebuild. And I read recently, you using that word crisis too. that a crisis in medical terms really is the turning point. It's either where the patient gets better or they don't survive. And that was an interesting idea where it's kind of that was a real point for me. And when I read that, I thought that's very true. Like there were parts of me that really had to go. And they were the parts that thought they could do everything and also thought that that was valuable. That was what mattered most.
Wow. So finding yourself again is beautiful, but vague as a way of speaking.
Hmm.
What did rediscovering yourself actually look like in practice for you?
I think it looked like incorporating time for hobbies again, doing things that were not necessarily productive on paper, resting, watching more Bravo television. We're really into Summer House and it's so toxic, but I can't stop watching. So there's that. Um, Exercise was part of it for me and coming back into my body in that way, paying attention to my body, eating when I was hungry, all of these really basic things. They're basic and boring, but they really are kind of the blocks that we build the rest of our life on. So I think it was that, and then rediscovering myself. I think a better way to say it is getting to know myself again because I had stopped paying attention to what felt joyful or good and what I needed. And I kind of lost touch with those muscles and those thoughts. We're just so attached to our patterns, I think, sometimes more than we realize. So the idea that I could do an activity and say, oh, that felt good or that felt bad. I wasn't doing any evaluating like that, where I would say, how do I feel after this? And even people in your life where you hang out with people or spend time with people, walking away, I think there is value in saying, how do I feel after being with that person? Am I drained? Do I feel good? How do I feel after I exercise? So, sort of that having an inquisitive internal dialogue, that was a huge part of finding myself again. It was paying attention to my rhythms and how things made me feel.
Wow. So is there anything in the book that you've changed your mind about since publication? Anything that you would do differently now?
I don't know that there's anything I do differently in terms of the writing and what's included in the book. I really don't I don't think what's interesting about it is that it is once it's done, it is done. Obviously, I mean, we joke about it being an ink and paper, but it's there's no, you hit a point during the process where it's like, okay, this has to be done. We have to stop revising. At a certain point, you just accept, okay, this will have some inaccuracies. So it goes out into the world. What's funny to me is I don't think I will ever reread it because it is a time in the past, but also it's doing whatever it needs to do in the world, I guess, if that makes sense. So I think there's sort of I think talking about being in touch with myself, I don't think it would be mentally great for me to think too much about the book itself or if I would have done something different because it keeps me there a little bit more. So, and for some people that's not an issue, but I think in general, I when the book finally finished, it was good to be able to share. There are a couple things I wish I could have included. I had some things that happened in high school, specifically a friend who passed away, and I wasn't able to include that for a lot of reasons. And I think that might have been a good unlock, maybe, with some of the ideas of what really got me later. But I think that it's done. So that might be a sort of strange answer, but there you have
Um,
it.
Wonderful. So I see that we still have some questions in the chat. So if you've already answered these when I dropped off, just let me know. I see one that says, "What would you say is your favorite part of the book?"
I think my favorite part of the book was writing about, I think my favorite part of the book, the part I can see myself most clearly, both in the real moment and in the written moment, was when I was watching the boys play in the pool and I was reading the book and I was just slowly starting to get close back to myself. I think that was such I I can think about the moments of joy that I was finding that little by little, and truly they were sort of turnkey, or not turnkey, but just turning points. So I think those are my favorite parts in the book, the slightly more hopeful ones, but also the ones that I think about all the time, which is what Tim said in the very end, which is to the kids, which is you, if you are having trouble getting out of it, you need to open your mouth and start talking. So things like that, that sort of, there are words that stay with me, like we were talking about earlier with books. And so the things that I've stored up for my own comfort from the book are my favorite parts.
Wonderful. Would you, so you're currently writing again. How would you describe your writing process?
Chaotic and probably not something to emulate in the slightest. I think what's funny for me is because I come to writing through reading. I have no formal writing training. And so even with this book, I had the manuscript and it was purchased, but the editing process, all of these pieces were so new to me. So I had to learn a language and a method. So I'm doing the same thing now with fiction because I can read a book and I read mostly on feel. So I finish a book and think that was a great book, but I don't always look at the hidden machinery that's behind it. And so that's where I am now, is trying to figure out what's the scaffolding that's holding up this book and why does it feel so good to me. So I think working on some of that and then trying to find how, I mean, I wrote this book sitting on the couch at the kitchen table. It was just in the midst of chaos. But now our lives have shifted a little bit. So trying to find more windows for writing has been a challenge. So,
Wow.
yes, chaos. My writing process is chaos and scattershot. Those would be the two important words. I'll give a TED
Fantastic.
talk on it. It's going to be great, guys. So many people will be
We would love that.
inspired.
Sarah asks, as a new mom, this was very helpful to read. What advice do you have for new mothers as they adjust to this new role and season of life?
I love hearing that, Sarah, because this really is the advice I wish I had given to myself in the form of story. I feel like, especially as women, we share our stories so well, and that can be it can be a more powerful tool than advice, because what it says is, here's how I figured out my code. Maybe that can help you figure out yours. And so I'm so glad that it was helpful. I think the thing that I should have done better, or I wish I would have done, is carve out time for myself. And that can look a variety of ways. Spending time with friends without your child around, missing things. I had one of my good friends, Margot, when I was missing events for the boys, and she said, "But Julie, it's great because then they get to tell you about it." And that's really true. So there are times, like my kids are at a swim meet right now. They're fine. I mean, they're older, obviously, but also then they can tell me about their experience, and all I have is their window into it. I don't have any thought about it or preconceived notion or things that I want to tell them. It gets to be theirs. And the older they get, the more that's true, because they start to live their own lives and it's their experience. So I think starting that early on and seeing the value in having your own personhood. So where you can, setting limits and boundaries. If you're a person who likes to exercise, then go take your 30 minutes and tell your husband he's on duty, or your partner. And I think demanding a little bit more of that is a really healthy thing you can do for yourself. Because I would drop everything at any moment for anyone. And I mean, spoiler alert, you've read the book, it didn't end well. So
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Thanks so much. This has been a great
Uh,
conversation.
yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for writing the book and sharing your vulnerability with us and putting a voice to something that is so often not spoken. That it's really meaningful to me. Certainly, as we in May, we're celebrating mental health awareness, and I am just so grateful for the book that you've written and the conversation that you've had with us today at the Gloss.
Thanks so much. And may I also say, I love what you all have in these book clubs. I think that would have been a great thing for me to have when I was a new mom too. Just ways that we can connect over books and reading, and it's a wonderful thing. I was so thrilled when I heard that you had chosen my book. So thank you for the time and for the questions and for spending time with the words.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so, so much. And again, thanks for your time today.
Of course, thank you. Take care,
All
everyone.
right. Bye. Thank you, everyone.